Welcome to Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life, with psychologist and author of over 75 books, Dr. Barry Weinhold. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life with Dr. Barry Weinhold. My name is Ben. Dr. Weinhold, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I just got back from a trip to Taos, New Mexico last week, and a magical place. If I know people who haven't been there, missing out. It's unbelievable.
That sounds incredible. I know that you needed it, and I'm glad. How was it?
Well, my daughter was with me, and my granddaughter and her husband were with me, and we rented an Airbnb that was absolutely unbelievable. It was just great.
How was your Airbnb experience? I've never rented one.
Well, I run an Airbnb.
Oh my God, that's right, you do.
Yeah, and the experience was perfect.
Very nice.
My granddaughter and her husband always stay in Airbnbs wherever they go.
I love it. I'm excited. I will be staying in my first Airbnb in a few weeks, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I mean,
so
they usually they do a good job of screening everybody and screening the places, and usually if you have pictures, they're pretty realistic to what you're going to get.
Nice, very cool.
So,
so we have no. Go ahead.
I just want to add one more thing to the trip to Taos. Taos is in northern New Mexico, and there's mountains, part of the Rocky Mountain chain, and there's desert, high desert, and there's in the middle of nowhere is a world-class hot spring spa. I mean, it is probably one of the top 10 in the world.
Oh, really?
And it's called Ojo Caliente, and spent a day there. So it was absolutely awesome. Gorgeous and wonderful, and I can hardly wait to go back.
That's awesome. I've never been to a hot spring. That sounds fantastic.
There are quite a few in the West.
Yeah.
And, this one was an old rundown one that somebody came in and spent millions and millions of dollars in making it first class.
You know what? I've never been to a hot spring, but I used to go on vacation when I was a kid to my uncle in North Carolina lived on a lake that was it was a man-made lake owned by Duke Power Co. or whatever their name is. And there was hot spring water in where like the hot exhaust from the water would come out from the plant. That's the closest that I could say that I've ever been to that.
Well,
so
put it
nowhere near the experience.
Put it on your bucket list.
All right, I'll put it on my bucket list. I need a list. Today we are introducing someone to the show that should change things up just a little bit, give us a little bit of a refresh. I'm excited about it because we are talking about, we're going to be talking about relationships this month and family next month and all sorts of wonderful things. And we thought that it might be nice instead of this face being on the other end of the screen all the time, if we could invite a producer who works with us that is a mom and a wife and an incredible producer and co-host as well to join the team. So I would love to introduce. I'm on the East Coast. Barry is in Colorado, as you know, and now we have someone from even more of the middle of the country. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd love to introduce you to my good friend Ashley Ross. Ashley, hello.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Welcome to the show. And I'm really excited for this. I'm really excited to see the conversations that you and Barry get into, and that all three of us get into for the next couple of weeks.
I mean, it's just perfect that you would be joining us when I'm talking about couple relationships and conflict resolution and all the things that you probably have a lot of experience in being involved with. So welcome to the show. And I'm really excited about having, instead of having to talk to this guy all the time, I can talk to someone else.
Honestly, nobody gets more annoyed hearing my own voice than I do. It's true.
No,
it's true. Great. Ask anybody. I think I talk too much. So Ashley, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into the show?
Sure. Thanks for stealing my thunder, though. I was going to start with the wife and mom part because I thought it tied in nicely, but that is part of it. And also a business owner. I co-own a co-working space that helps small businesses. I team up with Ben here for 321 and kind of pitch in every once in a while for some of the podcast things. And I also do a little bit of coaching / consulting for work-life balance, especially for parents. So I'm super excited to hear how we might be able to kind of share some thoughts on that back and forth. I'm really excited to hear, especially what you have to say on the family and the couples, because I know I could use some help personally as well.
Well, you're going to even be able to add a third one because I'm going to do a segment, a bunch of episodes on how to create an authentic workplace.
Perfect.
And I'm sure you're going to be able to jump in and offer lots to help fill that one in. So
looking forward to it.
Looking forward to that one too.
So Barry, what is the theme that you have selected for this month? And what do you have to start with this episode?
Well, again, I'm just going to try to help our audience learn how to get real and tame their demons. And obviously, I think I mentioned last time or one of the times that when you can name it, you can tame it. And so I'm going to be naming a lot of demons this month, and the ones that I think couples often face, although they may not name them as such, but I'm going to put a name with them, and then I'm going to talk about how they interfere with authenticity, and then what you can do about it, how you can remove those and tame those demons so they don't interfere anymore.
That sounds great.
So I work in my practice, my private practice, for at least 40 years. I've been working with couples. And many times I got couples who came, I was the last resort. I mean, they were ready to sign the divorce papers. Everything had broken down. And someone said, why don't you go see Barry and see if he can offer any help? And actually, a lot of those are still married today because they really didn't understand why they were getting a divorce and what the conflicts were all about. And usually the conversation would go like this: gee, when we got together, we agreed on everything and we had such a wonderful time. Everything was wonderful, but now we can't even agree on the time of day. And I would listen to all this, and then I would say to them, well, congratulations. And they would look at me like, what? They must have get ready to leave, walk up and leave, that they came to the wrong place. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So I explained what I meant. I said, the conflicts you're having now, the roots to those conflicts were there when you got married. But the first part of your relationship, the first stage of your relationship, was just getting to know each other and bonding with each other. And so the emphasis is on what we are, how we are like, and how many things we agree on. And then comes the conflict stage of relationship. And that usually shows up when the relationship is close enough and safe enough. So I said, congratulations, your relationship has gotten close enough and safe enough for conflicts to show up. And the conflicts didn't show up overnight. They were there at the beginning, but it just wasn't appropriate to talk about them at the beginning. And that's how couples develop. You need that first stage to do the bonding in the relationship before you can move on. So it's a natural that at some point conflicts will happen. And therefore, that's when I started to figure out, well, what of all the things, as I look back on all the couples I worked with, what were the two things that worked the best in helping couples who were in desperate straits? And the first one was saying to them, you're never upset for the reason you think you are. And that was really kind of a shocker to many people. And then I would put them through a diagnostic tool, which was mostly nonverbal, in which they would talk about they'd first talk about what conflict occurs in their relationship that never gets resolved. It's the one they hit the wall on, and it just keeps repeating, but they never get through it. So then I said, okay, we're going to take turns. One will be the sculptor, another will be the sculptee. So as the sculptor, sculpt without words how you see your partner in this conflict at this point. And then also sculpt how you see yourself in relation to this person. And so we had like a freeze frame. And I mean, sometimes you would have one couple pointing a finger at the other and the other one being cowered on the floor, or it may be the other person pointing a finger at them standing on a chair. So it varied with whatever the dynamic was that was going on. And then I would say, okay, sometimes I'll just put a piece of paper in front of them. Instead of seeing this other person, who do you see? And or the other way I would do it, if that didn't work, I would say, well, close your eyes and tell me how you're feeling right now. And they would do that. And I say, now open your eyes. Now close them again and tell me the first time you felt that way. Amazingly, people could say, I was 3 years old. I was 4 years old. I was 6 years old when I felt that way. And I said, okay, what was happening? And they would describe it a little bit. I say, that's what's bleeding through right now in your conflict. So, and I would look at their partner and say, did you know that your partner at this point was a wounded little girl or a little boy who was 3 years old or 5 years old? And they would say, no. And immediately some kind of heart connection would occur, some compassion. Instead of anger and conflict, there was compassion. They understood that yeah, as they thought about it, my partner was behaving pretty immature. But in looking at that was the first thing that I helped people see, was that there's something that's unfinished. And this is what I talk about all the time and on the podcast, is the natural learning style of human beings is anything that gets unfinished will repeat itself whenever the situation is similar enough to have it show up. So it's not that there's something wrong with you as a couple. In fact, I always would say there's nothing wrong with you folks. You just don't understand what you're dealing with and what you need to do about it. So that was step one. And that took maybe an hour and a half. And we do that with each person taking a turn being the sculptor. Then I would also, in that process, talk about how you're in a freeze frame here. So let's start with the person who's the sculptor. You make a move. And so they would make a move. And now I say, okay, now your partner makes a move related to that. And another makes a move. And so I was able to sculpt the resolution of the conflict. And frequently it was a smile on their face, a gesture. It was no words. And it was something that would indicate that, hey, I want to get through this with you. I want to see if we can figure this out. And the other one would respond with, yeah, I do too. And so I would then sculpt to where they resolve the conflict, where they were hugging. Then I would say, okay, in the future, let's look at this down the road. Suppose this conflict goes away and you finally get through it. It doesn't happen anymore. What would your relationship look like? Sculpt it. And that would give me a chance to see what their vision of the future of the relationship was. Was it compatible? I mean, I had only one in hundreds of couples where the sculpting of the future was not compatible. and I don't remember exactly how they sculpted it, but it was clear that they were on different paths. Other times it's usually they're holding hands, their arm around each other, walking out taking a hike together, or whatever it might be. Anyway, and it turned out that one, there was other circumstances that I was unaware of at the time, which the wife told me about later, and that explained the whole thing. And we cleared it up, went back and did it over again, and they're still married today. That's the first thing that I learned, is to get people understanding. And then in my book, I bring out ways to help couples then ferret that piece out and try to resolve that separate from the here and now conflict before they try to deal with the here and now conflict. And that often works, because if they can find some resolution and understanding of what's bleeding through, there's hardly anything left. And sometimes there was nothing left. It was all a bleed through from the past. And so that would often amaze them, that there was nothing left to deal with once they dealt with this. And then the second thing was, it was clear to me that these couples did not know how to resolve conflict effectively. They didn't have the skills. And so I put together worksheets of step-by-step processes that I would hand to them and say, take this home and practice. When you have a conflict, get out the worksheets, if you each want to have a copy of it, and go through it step by step until you get a resolution. And then when they came back the next time, I would say, well, how did we go? Well, we had a conflict and we got out the worksheets and we got through it. So when they started to get that kind of proficiency, then I knew they were done. And roughly most of the couples that I saw, even the ones that were in dire circumstances, I only saw for maybe 3 to 6 sessions at the most. So once you get to the core of the issue and get people seeing the conflict in it from a different perspective, a different set of eyes, then everything changes. So that really was how I saw the work that I did with couples being effective. And I would highly recommend that. And the book that I wrote, which I finally said, okay, I have all these things that I have taught people on a couple by couple basis. Let's put it all into a book. So I wrote a book called Intimate Combat that has all of the worksheets in it and has all of the material that I'm talking about, and even some that I won't be able to get to today, but it gives you step-by-step protocols to deal with conflicts of wants and needs, values and beliefs, intractable conflicts, and betrayal conflicts. And then also worksheets on how to deal with any bleed through from past unfinished conflicts or unresolved conflicts, how to resolve them. So the whole 9 yards is in there, and I highly recommend it for couples. Then, in addition to that, I saw that when there's bleed through from the past, and why that makes the conflict in the present so much more difficult. And often there is a kind of an anxiety that develops, or a fear that starts to develop. They don't feel safe in the situation because probably in the original unresolved conflict, they didn't feel safe. So they naturally would feel unsafe. And Ben, you shared an example. Would you mind sharing that again? I think it exemplifies what I was talking
about. Yeah, sure. So I at one point was it very much in my head with in a situation with someone that I was dating, and with I was able to recognize that I was in my, so like I had started to get in my head and I could feel my anxiety building, and then I was kind of getting miserable about other things because of the anxiety and the way that like the way that I deal with anxiety and all of those things. And I was like, I sat in it for a few minutes, and I could feel the anxiety, and the anxiety was the thing that I was worrying about, right? Not the not any sort of, and I wouldn't even call it conflict, but not the the thing that I had gotten in my head about. That wasn't what I was worried about anymore. It became somatic and all of these other things that happened to me from, like PTSD from years and years and years and years and years ago, as you've said. And what felt really great was that I felt comfortable enough to just say, hey, actually, I'm feeling anxious, and that's obvious. But when I started feeling anxious, I got in my head about this thing. And then we were able to have a conversation about that thing. And then that thing, of course, like 9 times out of 10, probably, if not more, is nothing that you should have, and that's what that's what I think people would get out of doing your worksheets and stuff, is that they don't, and reading your books like this incredible one here. Oh, I don't need to be full screen there. Is that right? It's that, most of the time when you're feeling off about something, not most of the time when you're feeling off about something, that's way too general, but a lot of times when you're feeling off about something, it's something else that's in your head that's wrong. And if you can find ways to communicate about it.
Sometimes people need a timeout in that time, when they're in the middle of some kind of disagreement or something where they're feeling the anxiety. Anytime you're in a situation where the reaction you're having to a 10-cent problem is 50 cents, it's greater than the situation would call for. There's some bleed through from the past. And so that's the time you think about, wait a minute here. I'm a little bit more anxious or a little bit more upset than I thought I would be. I need to think about where that's coming from. And that would be the time to do that kind of sort of introspection and self-reflection.
Thank God I've co-hosted so many of these therapy shows.
Right. Well, hopefully some of it's rubbing off. Right.
Hopefully.
Anything to add to that, Ashley?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that too. Recently, my husband and I kind of shifted roles. I've pretty much been the caretaker for the household since we've been dating, so like 10 to 12, something like that, years, since we've kind of been living on our own. And I did work during that time as well. It wasn't, just a full stay-at-home thing. But he recently shifted to be a stay-at-home dad, and I was the more focused on work. And I realized that I had a lot of anxiety around the things that were or were not getting done around the house, the way that they were getting done. And I think some of that in general stems from my own childhood, that my stepfather was an alcoholic, and a lot of the times I would watch my mom clean up after him, and he didn't really contribute to the house all that much. And so I think I've always carried a lot of that fear and anxiety around with me, that making sure that, my household is taken care of and that it's an equal partnership, and that I can verbalize those needs, which obviously just talking about it really does. It really does help.
Yeah. Well, good. And the shifting of roles, that's happening quite frequently in many young couples. And it is a challenge. I mean, you had to let go of your old role in order to fully have time to jump into the new one. And he had to do the same thing. So
exactly,
it takes a transition time.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
So the other thing I want to talk about before we finish this episode, is just how do you prepare for entering a conflict situation? And a couple of things. Now, when I work with couples in my current practice, I have a kind of a way I ask them to work on their conflicts. And first is, I have a communication exercise that I've developed. And I ask them to do that communication exercise as a couple. And it's a skill building exercise. And it has 14 different rules of communication. And you take the directions show you how how to do it. But basically, you take turns each reading one of the rules, and then putting in your own words, giving examples, and then go through the back and forth all of the different rules of communication, and it creates a kind of a common language to talk with each other about any conflicts. And I found that to be really helpful for couples to have, and that's available for a download if you want to download it. And the second most important thing is to try to figure out whether the conflict is a conflict of wants and needs or a conflict of values and beliefs. Those are the two kind of different kinds of conflicts. And the difference is that in a conflict of wants and needs, that the conflict has some tangible effect on you. I mean, the other person doing what they're doing is interfering in some way for you meeting your needs. And so if there's a tangible conflict, a tangible effect on you, it's pretty likely a conflict of wants and needs. And if there's no tangible conflict or tangible effect, then it's likely to be a conflict of wants and needs. A tangible effect on a wants and needs would be, your husband leaves the dishes in the sink, and you have to clean them up before you can use the sink or cook or prepare. It has a tangible effect on you, and that could be a conflict if it happens repeatedly. A conflict of values and beliefs is each of you have different standards of picking up after yourselves, which is pretty common. and so that one has to be dealt with in a different way. And there's each protocol has a step-by-step process for going through it. And so in that kind of conflict, it's not that you're going to try to change the other person's way of doing what they're doing. You develop some kind of compassion and understanding about the differences you have. It's an exercise in accepting differences, and that's the next stage of relationship. Is after you've had all the similarities, you have to find some way to accept the differences, and so that's where values and beliefs sometimes come in. And that can be also if you have different religious beliefs. How do you raise the kids? That can be a conflict of values and beliefs. So those are the two main conflicts. The third one is what I described earlier, which the conflict that never gets resolved. And there's also material in the book on a protocol on how to resolve intractable conflicts. And then next time, the next episode, I'm going to focus on a certain kind of conflict that I think is pretty universal, and I call it betrayal conflicts. And so that's the focus of next week, is to dig into what is betrayal, how does it affect relationships, and what do you do about it? That's
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Barry, and thank you, Ashley, for joining the team here. I can't wait. It's going to be a wonderful month talking about relationships. And so stay tuned, because we have more great episodes coming every Wednesday. And of course, if you want those free self quizzes, those free skill assessments, and worksheets, anytime Dr. Weinhold mentions any of that stuff, just click the link in the description of the podcast, and you can access everything that we've ever talked about.
You download it. Download
all of it. So thank you very much. And we will see you guys, or at least they will. They'll see you next week on Get Real.
Have a good week and have fun.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye for now. For more information, please visit the Colorado Institute for Conflict Resolution and Creative Leadership at CICRCL.org, or click the link in the show notes.